here has been threatened this week? One? Okay. George, come on. All right. Who here has been threatened since the new year? Who here has been threatened since the new year? So this month of January. Okay. Having 2 or 3. How many people here were threatened with violence last year? Okay. And this is from clients, I'm assuming. All right. Well, one of the things that I want to do is talk about assessing threats. But the first thing I have to get out of the way is, Jason, if you'll stand up for a second. And then will you threaten to kick my butt?
I'm going to kick your butt.
Okay. Wow, I might even have to take my jacket off. All right, try that again.
I'm not sure if you got the bus. I'll kick your ass.
Oh. All right. You know, the best thing about being threatened by, the best thing about being threatened by Jason is I don't really believe him. But you know, the second best thing about getting threats is if you're being threatened, they're not actually doing it. Okay? So, threats are a form of manipulation. They are either trying to make you feel a certain way, behave a certain way, but the good news is, for at least at that moment, Jason was deciding to use his words. All you parents out there have talked to kids, use your words. Yes, yes. Jason has decided to use his words instead of just stomp me into a little mud hole. So that's a good thing. I can work with that. The other thing is, violence is not easy. I know on TV it looks easy. I know that as generations have gone by, I can tell you gun stories. Did you know in the Civil War, like only half the people in battle would fire their guns? Everybody else was kind of acting like it, just because it's not easy to kill another human being for most of us. Now there are those sociopaths out there, and there's people like that, but for the most part, it's not easy. Violence just isn't easy. You almost have to work yourself up to it. For other people, for those other people, we hope the fear of punishment will keep them from hurting us. The story I have, there was one time, got in a foot chase, got the guy down. He's a little wiry fella, got him face down. I'm trying to get a handcuff on him, and I get one hand behind his back, and the other hand slips out. And so I get that hand behind his back, and the other hand slips out. And I realized at some point, and you know, this was back when I was young and fit, and you know, I couldn't control the guy. I would have had to break his arm to control him, and I couldn't do it. I didn't do it because I was not programmed to actually injure someone to get control of them. I got over that, but at that time, I only had about a year on the force. My mindset was not that way. But just be aware, violence is not easy. It's usually a last resort. There are some caveats to that. I always love the lines, you know, I think they said it about Jeffrey Dahmer. It's like, he was such a quiet neighbor. No, that means he kept to himself, and he didn't, you know, throw loud parties and stuff while he was killing people. But people don't just snap. There's a couple things to look for, some predictors. One of them is, do they have a history of violence? Going back to the domestic violence thing, if I abuse my wife after we get divorced and she leaves me, I will abuse the next woman too. There are some success stories in domestic violence where somebody stops being an abuser, but from my line of work, they're few and far between, and it's just I get used to using violence as a form of control. So a lot of times there will be a history of violence. Some people feel like they're pushed into violence. Some people feel like that, well, some people do have mental health problems. I get the impression from some of my conversations that some of the people you deal with also have either drug abuse, alcohol abuse, or mental health issues. Guess what? Yep, and all three of them together. They might even have a history of violence. So you guys are just running on all cylinders there. I understand why this is a concern, and it should be, because then they get mad at you. Let's do an evaluation. I got 3 statements. You make me so mad, I'm going to lose it. This paperwork makes me so angry, I'm going to shoot someone. I am such a screw up, I should just tie and take you with me as company. All right. So, out of that, how many people think the first line is pretty serious? Okay. If I said that, Charlene, if I said that line to you, pretty serious? Yeah. Okay. How about the second line? Not at all? Maybe a little bit? Okay. Third line? Okay. Well, one of the things I want you guys to think about, though, is if I can focus, if you are my problem, hurting you might solve my problem. Okay? I agree with you. The third line is pretty serious, but that's almost a depression type of anger. You know, I feel like I'm such a screw up, I have nothing to live for, I might as well kill you too. But be aware of that first one too. If I'm blaming you, George, for what's going on, then the little hairs on the back of your neck should be going up and going, maybe Jim's a threat here because he's doing this. Now the first thing I'm going to do if I want to be violent to Lori, nobody wants to think of themselves as a bad guy. In fact, that's why my strategy with how I do interviews works. Because I say, you could be a good guy that got between a rock and a hard place and made a mistake, or you could be a criminal. You know? So that's why it works, is because nobody wants to think of themselves as a bad guy or a criminal. So they justify it to themselves, or they have to blame someone else for acting badly. Back to the domestic violence thing, you know, it's your fault you got hit, Charlene. You didn't have dinner on the table. You don't seem like a domestic violence victim at all. You know that. All right. So just be aware. Are they blaming you? If they're blaming you, then there is a higher potential for violence there. If they're blaming the system, you know, no. There is. I can be as mad at this paperwork as I want to be, and it's not going to hurt you. You know, if I'm blaming myself so bad that I get depressed and my options start narrowing, then yeah, that could be an issue too. So first element, justify. Are they justified in violence, in acting violence? That's one of the first things to look for. When you're getting these threats on the phone, they're coming in the office and threatening you. Everybody here has been threatened in the last year. So first thing to do is look at it from their perspective and say, do they feel that they are justified in doing violence? If the answer is yes, go to step 2. Ex-boyfriend. George, I love you so much, I just want to be with you forever. I can't take being apart, and there's no one else for me, and our separation is killing me. We should be together forever, George, and we will.
You probably live with your mom.
Just because I told a story about my mom doesn't mean I still live with her. All right. The second line. You've ruined my life and my credit rating. I'm going to go around and screw all your best friends and get a second job. You're going to be sorry you ever left me. Okay? Which one of those do you think is more serious? One? Yeah. I agree wholeheartedly. Because on the second one, he has alternatives. Now, if I have an alternative, violence will probably never be my first choice. Violence will never be my first choice. If I have other alternatives to violence. In that second threat, he's going, hey, I'm going to get a second job and make more money, and you are going to be so sorry you left me, George. If I'm seeing other alternatives, then I'm less likely to be violent. That is why when you're working with people, and going back to the last presentation, when you're working with people, try to give them more alternatives. And I'm going out on a limb here because, like I said, I don't know what you guys do, but if I'm going to tell Charlene, I'm not giving you any money, but there's this resource, and this resource, now they have alternatives other than Charlene coming up and beating the heck out of me. Does that make sense? So that's another way to motivate people, to get them thinking beyond. Give them other alternatives. If they think that violence is the only option, first, do they think they're justified in doing violence? Secondly, do they think violence is their only option? If you got somebody like that, good chances they're going to be violent. So as you're evaluating these threats, look at that. Justify, and do they have other alternatives? And if you can, when they're threatening you, give them other alternatives. All right, evaluate these statements. I can make you famous. If you don't pay me, I'm going to kill you and your entire family. You're never going to be with anyone else. You better tidy up your affairs. What are we thinking? I don't either. But be aware, the first one is pretty serious too. As we get to the workplace safety, I'll explain why. What are the consequences of violence to them? If I am going to beat up George, or I'm going to kill George, then what are the consequences for me going to be? Now, George, you guys don't know this, but George and I have been in a dating relationship for about 5 years. You know, maybe she's just left me and I don't want her to be with anybody else. If I kill her and I go to prison, have I met my goal? Yes, I have. Favorable consequence for me. If I want to be more famous than the Columbine cowards, is that gonna be a positive for me? Absolutely, that's a positive consequence. It may be, you know, the threats, the consequences could just get you to act a certain way. If I say, George, you better be home by 3 or I'm slashing your tires. You know, if she's home by 3, favorable consequences. So that's the other thing to look at, and try to look at it from their point of view. And as you evaluate these threats, think about, will violence have a favorable consequence for them? Is there motivation to be famous? Is there motivation to make sure that George doesn't date anyone else? Is there motivation to get you to act a certain way, to accept a claimant? What terminology do you use? Is that right? Accept?
Open claim.
Open a claim? Okay, open a claim. And just be aware, for most of us in this room, except for Charlene, going to prison would seem like a negative consequence. But for them, it might not be. All right, these statements. I'm going to come to Cheyenne or wherever your office is, and I'm going to put a bomb under your car, George. Okay? Or, I know your parents live on 22nd Street, George. You should look over your shoulder when you walk the dogs in the morning, because someday I will be standing there and you will be sorry. What do you think? Second? I would agree. Bingo. What's your name?
Sue.
Sue. I'm going to pick on you now, Sue. Yeah, specific. The last part, of course, justification, shrinking alternatives, positive consequences for them if they do violence. You know, those are the 3. But then the 4th one is, do they have the ability? Okay? And that's what I wanted to demonstrate with this. If somebody says, I'm going to come to Cheyenne or wherever your office is, they have not invested a lot of time yet in figuring out where your office is. How many of your claimants, know what kind of car you drive? Okay? Yeah, exactly. Whereas the second statement, I know where you are, I know that you walk your dogs in the morning, you know, that's scary. That's the kind of stuff you should look at and should be calling the police. I mean, that especially, and as you do this, if you have those 4 things, give us a call. Okay? Do they have knowledge of your habits? Do they have the knowledge to carry out the threat? Just so you know, making a bomb isn't easy. You know, there's improvised bombs. You can do the dry ice bombs, those kind of things. You know, would they have the ability to carry out their plan before they got caught? Because if I'm going to kill George here so she won't be with anybody else, and I get caught as I'm walking into her office with a gun, I have not succeeded. So, do they have the ability to do this before they can get caught? Do they have access to weapons? Have they successfully used violence in the past? That's a huge indicator. And how specific is their plan? When we're evaluating a domestic violence situation, do they have access to weapons is one of the first things we always ask. And how invested are they in the relationship? But we'll get into that. Okay. If somebody is standing in front of you, Lori? Okay, Lori is standing right in front of me, and I am going to threaten Lori. Lori, if you don't sit down, I'm going to hit you in the Lori, if you don't sit down, I'm going to hit you. Lori, I am going to kick your shin right. Okay, be aware of that. Thank you. Be aware of that. As you can see, I'm escalating. Sometimes I have to talk myself into being violent. You know, by nature, I'm not a very violent guy, but if somebody is repeatedly and escalating and going up, be aware they're probably going to be violent. Okay? Now you can take a step back and talk to them about natural consequences. Like I said, never threaten. Now Lori was a little threatening, you know. But I could also tell that she wasn't going to actually hit me before I could hit her. But be aware, they might be talking themselves into doing something that they don't necessarily want to do. This is another example. There's threats and there are intimidations. A threat is a statement of fact. Charlene, I'm going to kill you. Okay? That's just a statement of fact. There's nothing going on there except I'm saying what I'm going to do. If I say, I'm going to kill you unless, that's an intimidation. I don't want to kill Charlene. I want her to fix dinner. Darn it. Got her hit last time. So just be aware. And I'll use threats when you guys will probably pick it out, but I'll sometimes say threat when I mean intimidations. Intimidations are basically, I want you to act a certain way, and a threat is a way that I'm getting there. So be aware that is something that you're looking at. I want to go on to something else. There are times that you can give in to threats, okay? If I am going up to Jason and I pull out my gun and I say, Jason, give me your wallet. Give me your wallet, okay? Now that should be a no-brainer, right? The caveat to that is if I try to get Jason to go with me somewhere, never do that, okay? If I say, Sue, come get in the car, I pull out my gun, I point it at Sue, I say, come get in the car, we're going for a ride. Don't do it, Sue. I could be a bad shot. You could run out the back of this room and have a better chance of surviving than if you get in the car with me, okay? So, and again, you know, you see organizations that get caught up in the ego that I'm never going to give in to a threat, where sometimes, you know, I am going to bother George every day until I get the $400 of my severance pay. Because you're a supervisor, right, George? All right, who's the supervisor? Jason, okay. Well, I guess we're going back to Jason. So Jason, I was promised $400 of my severance pay and I haven't got it. You better get it to me or I will be emailing you and calling you and harassing you every day. You know, and that's just it. If Jason lets his ego get in the way and say I never succumb to threats, that never happens, then I'll be calling him, I'll be harassing, I'll be emailing every day. And that might be one of those where it is okay to give in. It gives me, as the threatener, some sort of ego. I can feel like I won, and then I'll go away and I'll leave Jason alone. All right, let's evaluate this message. This is the last straw. I've tried to get through to you people, but you never listen. I even came to your office in person, but you treated me like an animal. You are the animals, you greedy little pigs. You won't give me what I deserve, so now you're going to get what you deserve. I put a bomb in your office, and now you will pay. Your bodies will be blown to bits and spread all over the parking lot. You should thank me. The fire from that bomb is going to get you used to being in hell. That's where you are going today at noon. I will be the last person you pigs ever abuse. How are we feeling about this one? I'm just throwing that out there. Because there's good and there's bad things from here. You know, I've tried to get through to you idiots, but you never listen. Shrinking alternatives, okay? I don't know what else I can do to get you guys to hear me. I don't have any alternatives. I even came to your office to speak to you in person. That means I have knowledge of where you work and what you look like. I don't know what you look at. Obviously, free cell. So I have knowledge to to come to this building. You treated me like an animal. Since you treated me like an animal, I'm justified in being violent to you guys, okay? You are the animals, okay? And this isn't something I really hit on, but I want it to kind of trigger in the back of your mind. If people start depersonalizing you, it is very hard for me to say Sue and then hurt Sue. Whereas if I go, you be, then I'm starting to depersonalize her. Also, it's signed anonymous, so it's obviously not for fame. This is something I would look at pretty seriously. The only thing that I would look at and go, maybe not, is bombs aren't easy to make. Most explosions don't include a lot of fire, so maybe he doesn't have the knowledge about a bomb as much, but this is still pretty serious. The only thing we're missing is the favorable consequences and the ability, and that's the knowledge. All right, so let's, as long as we're on bombs, because this is one of my favorite ones. Do you guys get bomb threats? You're kidding me. You have disgruntled people in Wyoming and they're not threatening to blow the place up?
Not yet.
Just, okay. That's true, and we will. All right, so somebody calls in and makes a bomb threat. And this gets people excited, or at least it usually does. It used to happen at Tri-Legent all the time, at least. But as you reason through that, so I'm a mad bomber that wants to bomb workers' compensation. So I am going to, and first off, I'm justified, shrinking alternatives, favorable consequences for me, and then I have the ability. So say I'm a miner, I have access to explosives. So I build a bomb, and somehow I sneak it into your building under Charlene's desk, because obviously I was a city miner, and I'm disgruntled with her. Yes. So I sneak it under her desk, and I'm ready for that bomb to, it's ready. It's on a timer. It's good to go. So why would I call and say, hey, Charlene, there's a bomb under your desk? Say I slept on it. I got it there the day before. I slept on it overnight, and I think to myself, Jim, that was really just a stupid decision to put that bomb under her desk and set a timer for going off at noon. So I'm going to call her up and say, hey, Charlene, there's a bomb. It's going to go off at noon. I feel bad, but then I don't tell her where it's going to be. Why would I do that? If I've really changed my mind, I've already set this, and I've really changed my mind, why would I just say there's a bomb there and not tell you where it is? So the mad, threatening bomber phone calls don't make a lot of sense. Usually what's going on is they're wanting to disrupt service that you guys are providing, get everybody out in the parking lot, go home early. I've been tempted a few times on Friday afternoon to call in a bomb threat to the detective division. I won't lie. Oh, woo, let's go home early. So just as you reason through that, I know that this is one of those where we get excited and go, ooh, it's a bomb call. But the reality of somebody actually having the knowledge, the ability, and then decide to call about it just makes absolutely no sense. Questions to ask yourself when you're being threatened. Do they feel justified? Are the alternatives shrinking? Will the consequences to their violence be favorable for them? Do they have the ability to do the violence? And obviously, do they have a prior history of violence? This include the military and the police in that. Like I said, there is, a wall, a buffer that we have to get through to be able to do violence. And police officers and military have gone through that, okay? The military got very, very good at learning how to make people willing to kill other people, because it's not natural. Have they stopped viewing you as human? Do they have specific knowledge that would help them carry out the violence? Is a threat early in the conversation or late? And that's something to think about too as you're getting those phone calls. If they start out with, you, Sue, you be, you've denied my claim, then you can talk them down. Probably a lot less likely for me to be violent to you. If it's the end of the conversation and I say, Sue, I'm hanging up and you and your family are dead, that's something to really, alarm bells should be going off, Sue. Things to do when you're threatened. Stay calm. They are not committed to violence yet. Don't threaten back. You know, that just gets the egos going, and pretty soon they have to prove themselves. You know, if Jason comes up to threaten me and I threaten him back, then he's got to show you that he is the man with the cojones, and he's gonna take care of it. Speak rationally, acknowledge a threat. You can even question it. You know, there is nothing better than when you actually question somebody and say, George, what you said just made me feel threatened. Was that your intention? Did you want me to feel threatened? Or are you just expressing yourself and that's the best way you know how to do it? You know, there's nothing better than that, because it immediately, because they're expecting you either to back down or come back. If you just come back rationally at them, you know, it almost makes them go, huh? Funny story. Offer other options to threatening you. Now, I interviewed this kid, and he's a suspect in the robbery. He was in the newspaper today. I interviewed him. He was in the interview room. We were going to arrest him. He decides, we close the door. He's not happy with us because he's just told us about the robberies he's going to go do. So he kicks the table as loud as he can. And I walk in and say, what's going on? And he rambles on for a little bit. And I said, well, you're going to go to jail as quick as we can get a car here. He says, well, can I get a smoke before I go to jail? It's like, no, you lost that privilege when you kicked the table. He said, no, it's because I'm black. Okay, so we all know that my natural reaction to that statement should be either A, no, I'm not racist. That's not why. Or B, I don't know what B is. but my reaction to that was, you kicked the table because you're black? To see the look on his face when I said that was priceless. And that's exactly what I'm talking about here when you talk about rationalizing the threat. You know, it immediately makes them go, huh? That's not what I was expecting. As a policy, and I'm not exactly sure what all your policies are, always tell somebody if you're threatened. I don't care if you go through the justified ability or shrinking alternatives, consequences, ability, and they're a zero. If somebody threatens you, you should always tell someone, all right? So I would, in my chain of command, I would tell my supervisor, you know, at the very least, tell a coworker and a colleague. You know, assess the threat. This is something else, and I've heard some stories about a guy over in Rock Springs or Rollins who's actually coming to their office all bloody and beat up, and he's doing it to himself because he's so mad at you guys. This guy should have his photo posted in that office, in this office, in every office around the state, because if you're walking in from the parking lot, and does everybody park out front or out back? Both? Side. Okay. You guys should know what this guy looks like. Obviously, if he's willing to beat himself up and be bloody and come to an office to explain that to you, we need to take him seriously. You guys should know what this guy looks like, so that if you're walking in from the parking lot and you see him, you can come in here, you can immediately call IT or whoever and get the doors locked down, because you don't want this guy walking into your office. As you mentioned, Wyoming still has guns. So if you see the disgruntled person anywhere on the property, make sure you let people know.